首先呢，问候大家新年好。那今年呢，我们会做在去年的基础上，在总结去年的基础上呢，会有很多新的一些改变和改进。今年一方面呢，我们邀请的演讲嘉宾的段位也不断的提升，同时我们也会在主题上面、内容方面不断的经过规划总结，变成一个有系统性的这些讲座。这样子，因为演讲嘉宾不一样，所以呢讲的东西呢可能比较多一点。那今年呢，我们在做一些大作，我们在讲座方面呢，在内容上面续性很强啊。如果您呢是关注学习到很多系列性的、体系化的关于组织隐形技能管理方面的一些技能，那么这是我们今年做的一些大的突破。那么同时呢，今年呢也会在招募更多组织隐形技能管理领域的这个专家加入我们的智库。那我们今年呢，原则上我们今年会把我们的智库的成员从50人拓展到200人，从26个国家拓展到超过50个国家这批的专家。OK， 是这样子的。同时，今年我们还会做另外2个大的突破是什么呢？我们今年会有2次全球性的论坛，2次全球性的论坛，一次是什么？一次是我们9月3号、5号在达沃斯举办的第2届组织隐形技能管理论坛，另外一次呢是我们在12月2号、3号在博鳌组织的另外一次世界性的组织隐形管理技能论坛。同时，我们也会在5到6个国家选取5到6个国家举办国家级的这种组织隐形技能管理论坛。所以这样，今年呢，我们会在从这个智库的整个工作角度来说，可能会大的一些突破。这时候简单讲，前面有个简单的铺垫。今天晚上呢，我们有请到来自于加拿大的，那当然他现在住在法国，那我们的就是老师给大家去讲组织如何通过创造性的艺术工具萃取隐形技能。那 Stephanie 老师也是个艺术家，所以待会大家听到他讲的时候，看到他 PPT 的时候，我想你一定会能感同身受我讲这句话的。 OK， 好，那么当然今天又是我们的第16场讲座，那这就是我们的 Stephanie 老师的肖像。那 Stephanie 老师呢，他有简单的，他是一个知识管理专家，他在高科技领域，在医疗保健和公共会计领域拥有超过30年以上的知识管理经验，他曾经为无数的组织带来知识管理的成功经验，他也是颠覆式知识管理机构的创始人，主张通过创造性的，尤其是通过艺术干预措施来萃取这个隐形技能。因为你有很多经验、知识、很多的智慧在大脑里面的东西，你怎么样方式才把它萃取出来？这个是目前全世界的一个难题。那么我们 Stephanie 老师呢，他在这方面有很多独到的之处。那同时呢，Stephanie 老师以前曾经担任过惠普公司的全球知识管理官，他也是那个 Entelechy 的公司的首席混沌组织官。这可能像各位朋友呢，也是第一次听到过这么一个新的名词。当然，他也是全球知名的咨询公司贝恩咨询的知识管理顾问，他也是一个非常有成就的艺术家。他曾经在多个地方举办过艺术展览。他曾经跟 Nick Meldon 先生合著了一本叫《知识管理战略制胜》这本书呢，中文版已经在2016年在中国出版，由华为的几个专家进行把它翻译出来。那这本书呢，我要稍微讲一下这个书很有趣。这个书是有趣的在哪里呢？这个书目前已经卖疯掉了。那在我们当然Stephanie 老师呢，在我们12月17号、18号呢，我们在海南博鳌的组织隐形技能管理首届论坛里面，他就讲过做过演讲。所以呢，他这个书呢，现在在中国已经卖疯掉了。我举个简单的例子，后面有个真实的情况。这本书呢，出版社目前的标准定价49块钱。大家看到今天的，我刚刚搜到过淘宝上面，你看一下。淘宝上面这本书，你现在卖已经至少在320块钱，低于320块钱，你已经买不到这本书了。也就这本书现在已经卖疯掉了。OK， 所以我想把这个 message 呢，也告诉我们今天的所有的演讲嘉宾，知识管理在中国的新的时代已经到来，这跟大家分享一下。所以这就是目前在这个领域的这么一个现状。好，那么 那么这个活动呢，是由Entelechy导师学院以及 GO-TKM 全球智库联合主办。那么Entelechy呢，它是一家总部在比利时布鲁塞尔的全球化导师服务咨询公司，它的业务遍布了6大洲35国家和地区。它专业提供了导师技术、服务课程，以及组织运行技能管理课程，以及它有培训、有咨询。它的所有的服务团队呢，包括课程呢，均获得过欧洲导师教练协会的认证。那么 Entelechy 在中国呢，也是一家注册在上海的一家中欧合资公司。2019年11月份首次把导师技术引入中国。那组织运行技能管理智库呢，它也是一家注册在比利时布鲁塞尔的非营利性国际智库。目前呢，它的智库的会员呢，来自于26个国家的50名顶尖的专家。那我们今天呢，我们是有请到Stephanie 老师给大家讲，下一周我们会请到拉萨的首席知识官跟大家去讲。好，那么呢，我就不多废话，就不多讲，我们下面来热烈欢迎我们今天的演讲老师 Stephanie 老师跟大家去分享。谢谢 Stephanie，Thank you。我把我的故乡。
Hi, my name is Stephanie Barnes, and thank you for coming today to my TKM forum session on radical knowledge management, accessing tacit knowledge through creativity and arts-based interventions. So, who am I? I'm an accountant and IT management person by education. I have an undergrad in accounting and an MBA in IT. I've been a knowledge management consultant by choice for more than 20 years. Currently, I'm Chief Chaos Organizer at Entelechy, my business. Entelechy means realization of potential, and that's what I aim to help organizations do, realize their potential. I've been doing knowledge management for more than 20 years. The first 4 years of my KM profession was at Hewlett-Packard, and then I've been self-employed for 20 years this year. So, more than 19. I've worked for a variety of organizations and industries, different kinds of organizations, from nuclear energy to NGOs to financial institutions to high-tech companies, all over the world. Additionally, I'm an artist and a painter, and that's what informs radical knowledge management. Also, finally, I'm Canadian but based in Berlin. I moved to Berlin just over 7 years ago and have expanded my consulting and art practices from this base. So I'd like to start my sessions off with a guided visualization just to help everybody calm down, get centered, get grounded. We're also busy going from meeting to meeting, Zoom call to Zoom call, or Microsoft Teams to Microsoft Teams, or whatever it is. So it's good to take a couple of minutes just to breathe, to calm and get centered before we get into what we're going to do. So that's the first thing we'll do. So hopefully you're someplace comfortable and quiet, and it's safe and comfortable for you to close your eyes and join in and follow along with this. If you happen to be driving or someplace that's not quiet and conducive to this, or if you're for some reason uncomfortable with closing your eyes and listening along with this, participating, that's fine. Just sit quietly and listen with your eyes open. So get comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and close your eyes. Picture in your mind's eye a small and delicate flower floating gently inside your skull, just behind the bone of your forehead. Notice the flower's color, its shape, the pattern of its petals. Let the flower drift slowly downward, gliding gently down your throat into your rib cage, drifting down, and down between your lungs, downward, gently downward, coming to rest in the lowest place in your abdomen, the place where your breath reaches when you breathe fully and deeply. A quiet touch of color deep in the darkness of your abdomen. Hold the flower there. Hold it. Hold it. Now, let it go. Let the flower vanish. But stay focused on the place where it was, deep down in the dark center of you. Focus on the darkness. Now, when you're ready, and only when you're ready, come back into our virtual room. Thank you. Now, normally I would take a few minutes and ask you to share your reflections with me. I'm going to ask you to share them in the chat or hold on to them till the end and just keep going through the presentation, my talk. So, but I do like to pause here. I think it's important to pause and just collect ourselves and reflect on that experience, and how it felt to you. Was it calming? Did you find anxiety coming up? What was your experience? So just think about that for a minute. Like I say, share it in the chat if you'd like, or share it at the end. And thank you. Now, moving on to the rest of our presentation. First, a little bit of context. Knowledge is information, understanding, and skills that you gain through education and experience. And that definition comes from the Oxford English Dictionary. This is what we mean when we talk about knowledge. A definition of knowledge management, which comes from the ISO standard that was created and published in 2018, says that knowledge management is a discipline focused on the ways organizations create and use knowledge. It's a holistic approach to improving learning and effectiveness, and that it's created by people. It's both intangible and complex. So, yeah, keep that in mind, that's our working definition of knowledge management. Lots of organizations will have their own definition of knowledge management, what it means inside their organization, and that's fine. I often say that knowledge management has as many definitions as it does have practitioners, but I do like this definition from the ISO standard as a kind of starting point for determining what it means in any particular organization. And again, this comes from the ISO standard, and it's a good base to start from, or a good way to understand the spectrum of knowledge, that there is all this tacit knowledge that's in our heads, why we're here today to talk about tacit knowledge. And that's knowledge that an individual maybe isn't even aware that they know, but it's something that they've learned through experience or through study, and their day-to-day experience, or their experience on their job. And so it's become ingrained in them. They can do it without thinking, kind of like tying your shoes. You don't think a lot about tying your shoes. It's just something you learned when you were a child, and you do it without thinking now. If someone were to ask you how to tie your shoes, you would have to think about, well, does the lace go this way or that way? What do I do with my fingers? It might even be just as easy to show somebody rather than try and describe it. So on the other end, from that tacit knowledge that we may not even be aware of, we have codified and structured knowledge. So that could be in a textbook, it could be in a document, it could be in a database someplace, and that's highly structured. There's tables of contents and headings and metadata attached to it. There's an organization to it. It's easy to find and work through such knowledge. And then there's everything in between. So knowledge that you might be aware of, but it's hard to express in words, or documented and recorded, everything, like I say, in between. So again, when we're talking about knowledge management, it's important to keep this idea that there's this spectrum from really tacit knowledge to really explicit knowledge, and everything in between, and to have different activities and programs in place to help access it and organize it and make it reusable and share it with others. So that's a bit of context to start off with. I mentioned I've been doing knowledge management for 24 years-ish, 24, maybe a bit more, 24 years. The world has definitely changed in that time. The world has really changed even in the last 3 years with the pandemic and people working remotely where they can. And that's changed the cultures of our organization and how we work and how we want to work. And so we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. As I said, 20 years ago, it was much more about technology and repositories and documenting things and helping people be able to find it, picking a good search engine. And it still is about those things, but those things aren't enough anymore. Since 2020 and beyond, into 2023 now and this decade and future decades, we really need to look at how knowledge management supports the organizations the way they are now. The economy and the environment is volatile, it's uncertain, there's so much complexity and ambiguity to things. Things change day to day or week to week. People are off sick, companies are failing, supply chains are problematic. There's all of this change and things, and we need to be ready to adopt and help our people be able to adopt and be flexible and be able to learn and to change how they're doing things so that they can be the best that they can be. So not only has the external environment changed, the internal environment have changed, people have changed. When I look at how people entering the workforce now compared to when I entered the workforce in the late 80s, early 90s, I think people are, and they've done studies on this, people are more engaged, they're looking to be more collaborative and creative, more innovative. They don't want to do the same old thing all the time. They want to be better at executing and implementing new ideas. They want to take more risks. They want to ask more questions and understand the big picture, not just their little corner of the world, their little part of the process. They want to understand the whole big picture. They want to be seen as individuals and not be coached, and be coached but not managed. So they want, that autonomy to get their job done the way that they want to get their job done and not be micromanaged and supervised, overly supervised and told how to do things. We're all knowledge workers at this point, and so knowledge workers need to work in a way that's efficient and effective for them, and that might be different from how the person at the desk next to them works and wants to work. We all have different personalities and different needs, and so that needs to be recognized. And so now in 2020, it's about people, process, and technology the way that it always has, but it's also about dealing with VUCA, that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. Everything's on fire. We need to figure out how to deal with it, how to organize it, how to help people learn and adopt to this ever-changing environment, and take steps and make progress, but be ready to pivot into a new direction if they need to, or when they need to. So when looking at all these changes, I thought, who can we learn from? Well, my artistic practice says artists and creatives. This model comes from a book that was published by Dirk Dobay and Thomas Copeland called Creative Company. And I worked with them on the English version that was originally published in Germany, in German, in 2018, I think. So this comes from the English version, which was published in 2020. So, and this is really highlighting that by adopting an artistic attitude and artistic practice, that we can create this culture of creativity, which helps us deal with VUCA. And they go into this in some depth in the book. So I don't really have time in this presentation to get into that, but they have talked to a bunch of artists and different creatives and created this model. They found that dealing with VUCA was most effective by adopting an artistic attitude that's creative, curious and passionate, confident and resilient, and that taking that practice. So perceiving, reflecting, playfully trying things out, performing it, handing off, showing it to an audience, maybe your teammates, maybe your boss, and then iterating again, and that creates this culture in the organization that's elastic, that's free and purposeful and full of variety, and they are efficient and effective at getting their jobs done in this crazy VUCA world. So what many of our organizations need is space to be creative and analytical, space to bring in that creativity, that's art-based thinking, so that people can be flexible and feel safe, that it's okay to try things out and do the iterations of trials and failures and asking questions and just being curious to see what happens. So we need that space. So many organizations have taken that space out in order to be efficient and effective, but people need space to think and reflect, especially when things get as crazy and chaotic as they are. We need some time and space to reflect and figure out what the next step should be. Maybe not what the next 10 steps should be, but what the next one step should be. Creativity is what differentiates us from AI. Everybody makes a big fuss about AI in knowledge management and how this is going to change knowledge management and change our workplaces, and it will. I don't mean to say that it's not, but at the end of the day, AI is a tool. Technology is a tool. It's our creativity and our humanness that make it knowledge. I would argue and have argued with people that once it's documented, it stops being knowledge. It's information because it's written down. But creativity and knowledge is human, and so we need to strengthen that in our organizations. It's something that AI doesn't do. And I know people will argue with me that AI is creating art. It's not. It's copying art. It's not making something new. It's not discovering something new. It's just copying what's already been done. The other thing that happens with creativity and making space for artistic thinking, artistic practice, is that it enables sustainability behaviors. And this was something I didn't realize at first until I got digging into this idea of what happens when we re-enable our creativity, because we're all creative. As children, we start out creative and playful, and it gets educated out of us. And what struck me about reintroducing creativity and arts back into people and the way that they work is that it also enables sustainable leadership behaviors. It helps create a sense of purpose and seeing the big picture, understanding the systems, thinking of it, embracing diversity and appreciating diversity, networking, open-mindedness, transparency. All of these things come out of adopting an artistic practice and an artistic attitude. And so this is even more important as the world burns up and climate change becomes an increasingly bigger and bigger concern, is helping people be more sustainable and seeing the interconnectedness of things, and not just saying, well, recycle your newspapers. There are bigger issues than that. Decisions around, buying cars or not buying cars, taking public transit, other purchase decisions, and just ways that we live our lives and run our businesses, to consider the interconnectedness of all of this and what this means, what these decisions mean for the environment. All really important. And all of it has been educated out of us because we were told as children that creativity and the arts aren't important. We need to focus on math and science. And so you see the push over the last few years to STEM and STEAM. STEAM actually includes the arts. So other people are noticing this too. So KM needs to catch up. So radical KM, which is what I'm talking to you about today, is including creativity, including the arts in knowledge management as a knowledge management activity. It helps us access things that we don't know or we don't realize that we know, put it that way. It includes all of these bits and pieces, and looks at playfulness and creativity, and continuous learning and sharing and collaboration. It's about making space to reflect, to iterate, to experiment and discover new connections by using creativity, specifically arts-based interventions. And we're going to do a little arts-based intervention so you can see what I mean a little bit later on at the end. So they can be really easy things to do. Even the visualization that we did at the beginning is a way to tap into and make some space for creativity, for thinking about things differently, for slowing down. So Radical KM activates sustainability mindset behaviors and through activating our creativity. So there's all of these benefits to Radical KM and all these reasons why we should do it. Now, some people will look at me funny when I say about using arts and arts-based interventions in organizations. But art already is used in organizations. I'm just trying to make it a bigger part of that. It's for years and years it's been used as decoration, as entertainment in organization. It's been used for instruments for team building and communication, leadership development, problem solving, and innovation. And finally, and most importantly, the strategic processes of transformation. So really transforming the culture of an organization, how an organization interacts with itself, the ideas that it comes up with, the identity, innovation. It helps with customer relations, or can help in customer relations and marketing. So as we progress through that list, it has a bigger and bigger impact, from decoration is nice to look at the walls, to really transforming the human interactions within the organization. And so this is where KM really gets involved in the third and the fourth points around the instruments for team building and problem solving, and for strategic processes of transformation. This is where KM plays and is playing in some organizations. I'm starting to see that in some organizations, that the knowledge management program is being tasked with innovation, and they're looking at activities like this. So the purpose for adding creativity and arts-based interventions to knowledge management. As I mentioned, it's innovation and knowledge creation, which is important. As the world changes, and becomes increasingly chaotic and confused, it's important to be able to look at things differently and realize that we can't just do business as usual. We need to do things differently. Maybe tap into things that we didn't know that we knew, the tacit knowledge, the stuff that's in our head. Maybe the arts-based interventions, and I've seen this when I've done them with organizations, helps people make different connections, helps people look at things differently. It helps them make different connections, put the pieces of the puzzle together a little bit differently, ask some different questions. All of this stuff improves employee engagement. It improves trust and relationship between people. It improves individual resilience and continuous learning. It helps them be more curious and be more critical in their thinking. All of these things, all of these benefits, and they've all been educated out of us because we don't think they're not science and math. We don't need them, but we do. They're so important, and this is the reason why the KM team really needs to reintroduce them. Implementing Radical KM is about going back to the roots of how people learn, how humans learn, being playful, being curious, and iterating, like children learning to walk, or building a Lego house, building a house with bricks. It doesn't work the first time, but the toddlers keep trying until they master it. And so we need to adopt some of that mindset, that beginner's mindset, and go back to the roots of how we learn, instead of thinking that we need to know it all without asking questions or without asking for help. We need to let that go and go back to being more playful and curious and trying things out. And so how do you implement this? If you work for an organization, a large organization or a small organization, really, that's risk adverse, that's really driven by math and science and analytics and big data, and there's nothing wrong with those things. It's about balance. And so how do you bring these ideas in? I have people say this to me all the time. Oh, I couldn't do that in my organization. They wouldn't go with that. And I say, people are human. They appreciate these things. They appreciate being given the time. And so even if you think your organization is risk adverse and won't go for this stuff, start small. Start with a little icebreaker. Start with a little guided meditation. Start small and just try it out. Frame it as an experiment and try it out. See what happens. In my experience, it really is well accepted. People like it. People enjoy it. They get a lot out of it. It's got a lot of benefits, and they're very easily and quickly bought into the idea of the importance. So try it out. I think sometimes the biggest problem is the stories that we tell ourselves about why we can't do something. But you can. Take a deep breath and do it. There are 2 implementation paths. The start small, which I was just talking about, and doing, work with individual teams or individuals and teams, doing little icebreakers at the beginning of meetings. Start with your KM team. I talked to a lot of teams about doing Radical KM training with the team, so at least the whole team knows, and they can support each other and take this out to the organization. Some organizations are using the office space because we're all working hybrid now. They've got this office space that's free, and they're changing some of that space into studio space. So and putting materials together and space together for studio work, so that when people are in the office, they can work together and collaborate together and in this studio space. Whichever path you take, you're going to need some patience. You're going to need to iterate, experiment, try and see what works with your organization and your culture. And most of all, you're going to need communication. Why are you doing it? Why is it important? Address all the concerns that people might come up with. So a bit more on the icebreaker approach. This is, at least initially, the knowledge management team facilitating small acts of creativity within the organizational setting. So leading a guided visualization, leading a scribble drawing activity, and this other little icebreaker, 5 or 10 minute icebreaker activities. There's improv games and storytelling games. There's all kinds of things you can do in 5 or 10 minutes just to get people out of their comfort zones, have a little bit of fun, because knowledge management should be fun, needs to be fun. It's fun when knowledge management is fun. And yeah, it just encourages people to be more creative and ask different questions, think of things differently, ask some different questions rather than just being stuck in the same old box, doing the same old thing every day. Studio space is a bigger initiative. It takes more management support, more buy-in, more money, certainly more space in the organization. So most organizations won't start here. Some organizations do. Some organizations are recognizing that people are working from home and they have this extra space, and so they're turning it into studio space and putting some art supplies and some other materials in there, creating a space for studio. There's some good practices that have been found. That organizations have actually been setting up studios within their offices for 10 or 15 years at least at this point. Some of the case studies I found went back into the early 2000s, so maybe even close to 20 years at this point. It's important to give the space a name that's acceptable in the organization and means something, so that people know what you're talking about when you talk about the studio. It should be located in the office space, but separate from the main workspaces. So it's easy to get to, easy to access, but it's not disturbing people who might be working at their desks. Certainly some of the teamwork and collaboration and things that go on can get a bit noisy, so it's good to have it not quite right in the middle of things. It is important to have facilitators, and so this is where the knowledge management team comes in. They can be trained to facilitate this, put together a facilitation process for the space and help people through this process of problem solving or visioning or strategizing, whatever they're doing in the space to solve the problems. It's important to remember, and I can't stress this enough, artistic skill is not necessary. This is not about painting the Mona Lisa. Painting, artistic activities are a means to an end. It's about the experience of creating and the discussion and the reflection that happens, that thinking about the metaphors and challenging you to look at things differently and be more critical, and also be more open to asking questions. That's what's important. It's the process that's important, not the end result. I always tell people they can throw the paintings out at the end of the day. It's the experience that's important. So get a lot of questions about, does creativity fit into your KM process? The short answer is, and if you walk through this flow chart, you get to the same place, what I'm going to say. The answer is yes, if people are involved, there's an opportunity for some kind of artistic intervention. Could be big, could be small, depends on how much time you have, what you're trying to do, what the purpose is. And so, yeah, you need to figure those things out. But if people are involved, if relationships between those people or among those people are important, there's an opportunity for some creativity and smarts-based interventions to be incorporated into the knowledge management activity and to tap into that tacit knowledge. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that we were going to do a little icebreaker activity so that you could have the experience of doing the icebreaker. So I am going to do this along with you, well, as part of the recording. So you need to have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, something to make a mark with. I have a marker because that shows up better on the camera. And so I give you a second. Please go and get a pen or a paper, something to make a mark with. Can just be a scrap piece of paper or a page in your notebook. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. This is not hard. So I have my marker and I have my scrap piece of paper. I'm going to put it on the table. I'm going to take the cap off of my marker and hold it over the page and make a scribble. Just a quick scribble. I'm going to open my eyes up and look at what I've drawn. So hopefully you can see that on the screen. That's my scribble. And then we're going to take that and rotate it around and see which way maybe it makes sense or feels better one way than another. I actually like mine the way I drew it, so I'm going to keep it oriented that way. I'm going to put it down again, and then I'm going to add 4, 5, 6 embellishment. Make some additions to it. Still using the same marker or pencil pen that I started with. You don't have to change colors or anything like that. Just going to add some embellishments, some other lines, some curves. And so I'm going to take a moment and do, like I say, 5 or 6 of those. So I will hold it up after each one. So there, I added another line, a curve. I'm going to you can make a design out of it. You can turn it into something representational, whatever you, oh, I hold this up again. I've added a couple more lines there. And you're adding your lines on your scribble. I'm gonna add okay, that's what mine's looking like. I just flipped it because I decided I liked it better this way. So I have flipped it around, and I'm going to add just one more line here, 2 more lines, and call it done. Okay. And there's mine. So I'm not sure what that looks like. Sometimes mine don't look like anything. They just kind of are little doodles, so little shapes. So it's definitely more of a little shape today. Maybe it looks like some kind of a sea creature. But the point of that is, so the point of the scribble drawing is just to free up the mind to think. Just relax a little bit. It's not about creating anything in particular. It's just, yeah, shift our mind away from whatever we've been working on. And just to take a moment and reflect on the scribble drawing activity Again, I think it's important to take a moment and reflect on this, on the experience of it. I will often do them when I'm stuck and I need a break, for a quick break between meetings, or if I'm stuck trying to write something or create a slide deck or a document or something, I'll take 5 minutes and do a scribble drawing just to get me, out of whatever rut I'm in, get me thinking again, give me a little pause. So again, I encourage you to share any reflections in the chat or when we open up for Q&A in a couple of moments. But think about that experience. I have had people, when we've done the scribble drawings, tell me that they got insight into a problem that they have been trying to solve for, the last 4 months. And this 5-minute scribble drawing thing helped open up whatever the blockage was, and they've found a solution that they had of a problem that they were struggling with. So we often discount these little activities because they're silly little things that we can throw in the garbage on the way out the door from the workshop, but they can have a huge impact. And so it's important to not discount them just because we don't understand or they don't look like they're necessary. They really are. And it's really necessary to give ourselves a space to look at the world differently, to ask some different questions, to take a break from staring at the computer screen, to look down and play with a marker for a minute on a piece of scrap paper. It is important. So we're going to take some questions in a moment. I just will bring your attention to, there's a book list on the slide deck. So those are some of the early books that I read that influenced my thinking around Radical KM. One of my favorites is actually the last one, Orbiting the Giant Hairball, A Corporate Fool's Guide to Surviving with Grace. Kenzie, he worked at Hallmark and had a team that encouraged people in the organization to be creative, and so did a lot of these kinds of things that I've just talked about. And in fact, the guided visualization that we started with comes from that book. So some resources there. I have a much longer book list. It's about 45 books now. So I'm happy to share that if anyone's interested. And I have a Radical KM class coming up later on this spring. If you're interested in that, it is in English. But if you're interested in that, let me know and I will get you some information about that. So it's 13 weeks, 3 hours a week. And we will have a lot of fun. And that's my contact information if you're looking to connect with me. So thank you very much. And now we will go over to questions.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for your wonderful sharing. And I mean, for this webinar, we actually start from the first time doing in this way. I think it's a kind of new way of doing that. So will save us a lot of time to do that. So really, I learned a lot from this webinar. So maybe before I do that, maybe I just want to know whether we have any other questions from our audience within this room. Of course, we also have some other people which they may not be able to join our Zoom because of the limited size of the room and so on. So is there any question from our teams? Or I will ask one question.
I'm just going to acknowledge, I just want to say thanks to Jane for sharing her experience of the meditation, the visualization at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I also realized that you start with meditations and just help me to segregate all the busy days, and then now I can focus. It's the best way to hold for a while and then make yourself to the new things. I think this is very good tools for that. Thank you for that. It's a
You're
very good
welcome.
experience.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and it does help separate because we're all so busy, and so you're doing that little 3-minute guided visualization or meditation at the beginning really just helps people calm down and center and makes us more focused for what's going to come. So thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Yeah, maybe Stephanie, during these Q&A sessions, since we have a lot of Chinese people, listen to this, so I would like to ask IC to the translation for our dialogue just now, and then we can just continue.
Sure.
Yeah. IC, can you do the simple translation for that?
刚才 Stephanie 她是采用了很多的方式，可以去帮助我们在工作和生活中，就是让大家平静下来，从忙碌的生活中找到一点空间和间隙。那就像刚开始我们做的这个视觉化引导，就是有点像冥想。那这个也是一个方式，帮助我们很好的就是能够聚焦自我，然后集中我们的注意力，让我们更好的放松。那大家如果还有问题的话，现在可以提问。
Okay, great. Thank you. So Stephanie, actually, I realized, tacit knowledge management, how to get the tacit knowledge management from the people's brain is the most difficult things. This is not like the explicit knowledge is easy for documentation, digitalizing, that's easy. But how to dig out that from the people's brain, I think you mentioned very good tools for that, because especially when we try to dig out the people's, we say, the unconsciously competence. That's something, it's not something you ask people and the people get answer you the questions and then get it done. It's not that way. Even sometimes people don't know at all. They don't know, they don't know, okay? They don't know, they know, okay? So that's the issues. And then I'm thinking of how's your experience, or any successful stories you had it. You can share with us. Maybe just some of very short cases you did it in the past for this kind of very special knowledge extractions somehow. So can you just share with us? Thank you for that.
Yeah. Does IC need to translate your question?
Yeah.
Yes. 就我们知道，就是我们所具备的那个隐性技能，其实萃取我们的隐性技能是非常难的，因为隐性技能不像我们的显性技能，它可以通过文档、从数据库文件的形式记录下来。那就是有没有这样的一个工具，它可以去帮助我们，然后去萃取我们的大脑里的隐性技能。因为有的时候我们其实不知道一些可能知识、技能、经验什么的，但是我们不知道自己不知道。或者是我们已经具备一定的某方面的能力，但是我们没有意识到自己具备这方面的能力，这些呢都关系到我们大脑里的这个隐性技能。那 Stephanie 就是根据你自己的经验，有没有什么成功的故事案例可以分享给我们，就是如何去萃取我们的隐性技能。Stephanie?
Okay. So yeah, I maybe a quick example. I mentioned a bit of the detail in the video when we were doing the scribble drawing. I was doing this scribble drawings for a group of knowledge management people, just to teach them about the methodology. And one of the people at the end, she's like, she had been struggling with trying to figure out how to brand their KM program for her organization for months. For like 4 months, she'd been struggling with, how to brand this. And after the scribble drawing, which, took 5 minutes, she's like, oh, I know I'm going to brand it. I know this problem I've been struggling with. So clearly the information was inside her. We all know there's so much stuff in our heads. We know stuff. She knew it came out of her. She just didn't know it. She hadn't been able to access, that part of her subconscious to solve the branding problem. So this is, I have longer examples. I don't want to go on too long, but there's so much stuff in our head that doing these creative activities just kind of frees up the space and helps us look at things differently.
举个例子，就像我刚才跟大家介绍的这个涂鸦活动，虽然看起来简单，但是它的带来的效果可能是惊人的。就像我之前我在一个组织里，就是跟他们一起共事，然后他们有的人呢，就因为这个就感到很头疼，因为他们过去4个月里就是想把这个知识管理项目，然后引到他们这个组织里，但是一直没有成功，因为他们不知道到底怎么在这个组织里去实施这个知识管理项目。然后呢，我就带大家做了这样一个涂鸦的游戏，然后就5分钟的时间，然后他们就反应过来了，哇，我知道怎么办了，我知道怎么把这个项目然后引入到我们组织里了。就是因为在可能过去的一段时间里，因为我们的大脑因为就是可能各种各样的想法，然后都堵塞在里面，就通过这样简单的创意性的活动，然后突然就让我们的思绪突然打开，然后就让我们的整个的思想就是都解放开来，然后就让我们可以突然可能比如说天马行空，然后就触及到了我们潜意识里的东西，就是我们其实已经知道的，但是我们之前一直没有意识到的，然后突然就是我们的意识呢也整个就打开了。那我暂时呢就不讲一些更长的例子，就是想通过这个然后告诉大家，我们可以通过一些创意性的活动，然后让大家就是跳出一些固有的思维框架，然后去寻找一个比较新的不同的然后看待事情的这个方式。
Okay. Yeah. So one more question is, Stephanie, I realize in these stories, in these real cases, I think there's one of the role may be very, very critical, which is the facilitator's roles. A good facilitator may use this kind of environment, the tools, and then try to encourage or motivate the people to think about much more than they can write down and so on. So can you just share us with some of the very critical, factors which the facilitator should pay much more attention to during the whole process?
Yeah, the facilitator's role is so important to guide people through this arts-based intervention process, because people are uncertain, so creating that psychological safety so that people feel like it's okay to make a mistake, or at least what they perceive as a mistake, and just create that safe space so that it's not, people don't feel judged, that they are open and curious, and I'll say about an example from a workshop that I did a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if I should stop now and let Icy translate part of it, and then I'll continue the story, or should I?
Yeah, Icy do the translation.
Okay.
我们知道就是在进行这些创意活动的一个过程中，然后里面有一个非常重要的角色，就是引导者这个角色。那引导者他在这个过程当中，就是如果是一位好的引导者，他会充分的利用周围的环境，利用各种工具，然后去鼓励大家去就是开放自己的思维，就是让我们就是想的东西能比你写的东西多出来，能让大家就是头脑风暴，集思广益。那就是有哪些因素就是这个引导者他需要在这个创意活动过程中需要注意的。Stephanie 她回答，首先是这个引导者的角色在这个艺术干预过程中确实非常重要，因为像比如说我们的员工，他在这个过程当中他是需要有一个心理安全感的，因为在这个心理安全情况下，他能够觉得自己 OK， 我犯错误是没关系的，我可以犯错，然后我不会受到评判，然后我可以以一种非常开放好奇的心态去面对各种难题。那我现在举一个例子，这个例子是在几年前，当时我做了一个工作坊。Stephanie?
Okay, so this workshop I did about 5 or 6 years ago was really when I was still getting going. someone walked in, one of the participants walked into the workshop and saw all the art materials on the table, and he was so upset that we were going to paint. I mean, the workshop description said we were going to paint, but he was, turned to leave. And we talked, a little bit about what his concerns were, and I convinced him to say that it would be okay, and he didn't have to do anything that he didn't want to do. And so he stayed, and after the first layer, we were doing layered paintings over this 2-day workshop. And after the first layer, he came to me and said, "Oh, I got brown in my yellow. I've screwed up." I'm like, "Oh, that's really too bad. I'm sorry." And we talked about it, and I came up with some crazy ideas to fix it. But the best thing really was just to let the paint dry and figure it out for the next layer, what to do, and incorporate the brown into the yellow. And so that's what he did. And by the end of the 2-day workshop, he had this painting that he loved. The floor hadn't opened up and swallowed him whole. He had done something, he'd overcome this fear. And he said later to me that was magic, that I hadn't yelled at him, that I hadn't judged him and told him he was wrong. I just held the space for him and let him, helped him through that uncomfortable feeling of having made a mistake. And so that was magic. And this is what happens, we make different connections, and this is the importance of a facilitator, really, is to hold that space and not to judge.
那在就是大概5到6年前，然后我们当时做了一个工作坊，这个工作坊为期2天，然后当时呢就是在这个工作室这个里面桌子上就摆满了各种各样的材料，各种各样的颜料、涂料，然后当时呢就有一位男士，他当时是因为他在画画这方面是非常不擅长的，然后他对做这个事情来说对他是有困难的，然后他呢就很想离开，然后我们就跟他交谈，就是谈为什么，就是他到底是有什么样的可能担忧，然后让他这样就是想逃避，然后我们就告诉他就是没关系，如果他不想做那就不做，是我们就是简简单单的去尝试一下就可以。然后当时呢这个就是绘画呢我们也是分几部分进行的，然后刚开始的时候呢他就不小心就搞砸了，然后他当时呢就很懊恼，就是一直说我很抱歉我搞砸了，很抱歉。但是呢后来呢我就想就是我们可以做的疯狂一些，他既然比如说在这个画画的时候他就刚开始他搞砸了没关系，那我们就继续就是把他这个搞砸的画就是继续进行下来，然后第2天呢然后他就沿着这个画然后继续画，然后画到最后呢然后他的反应是我非常爱我的这幅画，然后因为他在这个过程当中克服了他的恐惧，然后他也很感激我们就是没有去对他就是比如说吼叫呀去批评他，也没有去批评他说犯了什么错误，那我们做的事情主要就是在这个过程中一定给他一定的足够的空间，让他觉得心理上是安全的，是舒服的，是觉得犯错是没关系的，就让他这样就是大胆的去发挥自己的创造力。所以我们引导者在这个过程当中就需要能去面对不同的情况，然后不同的人，我们要然后建立这种不同的联系，最重要的是一定不要带着一种评判的心态，然后对待就是我们的工作坊的这些成员或者我们活动中的参与人员。
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie, for this.
Yeah. Welcome.
So, any other questions from our teams, or otherwise we can just stop here because I think time's up. So we don't want to take up too much of our speakers' time. So thank you very much, Stephanie, for your time, for your support for this. This is really very great sharing to us. And then after this webinar, I'm thinking of try to get some feedback from all our audience. Okay. 那么这个活动结束以后，我们希望各位呢能给我们有一些这样的在线的反馈。那么这扫我们的二维码，给我们一些反馈情况。By the way, Stephanie, just one thing I want to share with you because just now you may not know this at all. Maybe you don't know this. You know the book, your book, original price was 49, which is around 7 euros.
Okay.
And now the price goes up to around 320.
Oh my.
You can just imagine. So,
Wow.
Last time when we talk about this TKM in China, we have a lot of webinars, we mentioned that TKM, KM, and so on. So people realize and go to the bookstore and buy the book. So now your book has been fully sold, and then so these are the books available from the internet. So someone bought it and then resell that, so at a good price.
Wow.
Just for your information, because these are the screenshot I take from the internet just now. So
Okay.
it's the latest.
Wow.
Just for your information, of course. So 如果我们任何其他的朋友呢有兴趣阅读这本书的，希望你呢在网上去抢购，不然就没了啊。然后呢，这个书呢确实很棒啊。你看这个书有华为公司的这个几个专家一起帮助去翻译的，翻译的非常棒。I read your book. It was awesome, very good.
Oh, thank you.
Translation was also very good.
Oh, good.
So just
Good.
some feedback for you. Okay, thank you. And then so afterwards, next week on February 13, okay, 我们会邀请到我们的来自于美国 NASA 的前首席知识官 Roger 给大家分享，就知识管理如何造就 NASA 的文化。然后我们也欢迎大家扫码报名。然后呢，你如果现场来听的时候，你是 free 的，你是免费的 ，OK， 你是 free to attend， OK。那么这是我们的下一期。那同时呢，就像我前面讲的 ，you see actually Stephanie, I just came back from Davos, and then it was a very nice place for us to be there. And we decided that we will have our conference over there on September 3 to 5.
Nice. Excellent. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. So 那我们呢已经确定下来了，我们会在2023年9月3号到5号在瑞士达沃斯举办我们的第2届组织隐形技能管理论坛。关于这个论坛的详细情况，欢迎大家关注我们的官方账号，官网 GO-TKM.org。 OK， 谢谢各位啊。那么我们下周再见。Thank you, Stephanie, for your good sharing. Thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.